Easily the most action-packed battle we've ever had. And you missed it. That's what you get for following Knuckles around.
Who are you talking to?
Remember Sonic Boom? Yes, the show, but another piece of Sonic media with the subtitle of Boom. No, not the song. Yeah, you're having a bit of trouble, aren't you? Know why? It's because nobody talks about it. Until now. The Sonic Boom series is the biggest double-edged sword of the entire Sonic franchise. On one hand, we got a really good animated series. I remember watching the early episodes of Sonic Boom around the time of their initial airings. I enjoyed the writing, characters, and my very first video on the channel was a YouTube proof of it, squashed into gorgeous 4x3 Windows Movie Maker quality. But I made a better one 4 years later. It was one of the few shows at the time I was actively keeping up with, mainly the first half of Season 1, and is considered one of, if not the best Sonic cartoon. But on the other hand, the critical and financial performance of its counterpart, Rise of Lyric, was so damaging, it caused a layoff of over 300 employees, resulted in uncertain faith in the franchise again, and led Sega to re-evaluate the plans for Sonic going forward. But they did start development on Sonic Mania a few months later, and the Twitter account became sentient, so perhaps something good came out of this. Even though I wasn't on social media back then, I remember following the news of Boom up to release. Seeing the initial trailer with Bannerang, the memes about the new designs, and witnessing it get trashed by fans and critics alike. Glitches, bad frame rates, Sonic's in a new dark age, worse than 06. But where Sonic 06 continued to be mocked years after its release, only for Sonic Forces to step in and take the mantle later on as a punchline for fans, Rise of Lyric is rarely talked about nowadays, despite being considered by many to be worse than the other two. Whenever the subject of Sonic Boom is brought up, it's always about the show, and Rise is barely even brought up in discussion about Sonic in the 2010s. It's like Free Riders. Everyone says it's bad, but they also choose not to talk about it. Either out of sympathy for its troubled production, or because not many people played it, including myself. I mean, that'll likely change if Jay's Reviews gets to talk about it, but regardless. But we're here today to talk about the storylines in this game, along with its two counterparts, Shattered Crystal and Fire and Ice, and see if they manage to elevate them in some shape or form. As well as see how they compare to the mainline stories around the same time. Everyone loves the writing of the TV show, so surely the games have great writing too. Right? Rise of Lyric's story is not that bad.
Not that bad?
I mean, could it have been better? Definitely. Does it carry the game like Secret Rings plot? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But it has enough interesting ideas to save it from being a total mess, and Sonic opinions that go against the status quo get attention. You clicked on the video,
So let's do this thing!
And start from the beginning. No, the actual beginning.
Yesterday.
It starts off in a rather fun way. The opening chase is actually rather good. It takes a similar approach to Sonic Unleashed intro, with being caught in the midst of an Eggman encounter where he gets the upper hand last second. The introduction to Lyric is promising, and the bickering between them when Sonic kicks off the events. After that, it's mostly a fetch quest to get the crystals, and that's about it. Some events happen, and then they beat him with teamwork. That's the main gist of it. The story is framed as more of an adventure of the week-like story, similar to Sonic Heroes and the Riders games. I previously said that could have been an interesting direction for storylines to go in the 2010s, without trying too hard to be grand scale, still developing the world-building continuity in an interesting way, but not being too empty at the same time. And it mostly does well in that. It's kinda hard to talk about this fully, even without the game, but I'll try to break things down. Most of the jokes and savage writing is alright. There are one or two dud ones, but it's almost in the style of the show and more fitting than some of the ones in the main series. I heard some of the writers of the show rewrote some parts to make it more lighthearted, and I can see it in some areas.
Sonic and I will go get the crystal. Knuckles and Tails, you stay back in case the village is attacked again.
Who put you in charge? I say Tails and I will stay back and protect the village, and you and Sonic take the elevator.
You win this round, Knuckles.
Even with the rewrites, most of the more serious moments have a bit of weight, and listening to some of the cut dialogue reveals some even greater lines.
If anyone can tell us about what's going on, it's Cliff.
Who's Cliff?
He's an archaeologist.
Isn't that a chain of islands?
That's an archipelago.
I thought that was singing without music.
That's a cappella.
I thought that was someone who studies ancient civilizations.
Just shut up and follow me.
The Boom series is what got fans to like the new voice cast more, and all of them do a good job of what they're given. This is the first time Colleen O'Shaughnessy voiced Tails for the series, and her voice for him is a good evolution of Kate Higgins' voice. And it's great that she got to voice him for the movies too. The segment with Sonic and Knuckles is alright. I like this moment with Sonic doubts Knuckles, and later on he unintentionally compliments him.
We did it!
Who brought the thunder? This guy. You said we. I heard it.
Nah, you have too much dirt in your ears.
But you did say it. I'm proud of you. That's what a good teammate would say.
That's a really good moment. If they established that they hadn't known each other very long, it would have added to Sonic's apparent character growth. Sonic seemed to have this planned arc about being less of a lone wolf and letting teamwork, with how Lyric and Shadow put him down for it. But parts of it seemed to get muddled around to not make it fully consistent. The only time there's doubt is the aforementioned Knuckles part and when they surrender the crystals to Lyric. I initially disliked the fake out part where Sonic gets shot down and covered in rubble, only to be recovered instantly, especially with how it's shown as the opening as an in medias res. But it does add a bit of consequence despite being brushed away too quickly. And while it could have been a bit more natural, at least it doesn't lead to a moment where Sonic yells at his friends for giving up the crystals so easily and letting Lyric get away, resulting in a falling out where they all split up before the third act. Which is a trope I don't entirely hate, but it seemed like a route they would have taken if it wasn't so close to the end. It's strange that Sonic is more determined and sometimes stern approach to situations here compared to how boastful, casual, and occasionally grumpy he can be in the show. I guess he does lean a bit closer to his pre-Colors personality, but it does clash with his personality in the show. This does take place beforehand, so by this point he wasn't being criticized for trivial issues like calling someone a guy, or dealing with the other miscellaneous shenanigans within the village weekly. I feel out of the four, Amy has the least amount of stuff to do. It's clear some plot elements with her were likely cut or shifted around to take place off screen. Eggman doesn't have as much of an active presence after the chase, but it's interesting how he's more of a secondary villain as opposed to being the main antagonist for the whole story, or a main antagonist up until the last 15% where he's upstaged. He has a few funny moments, and the way he acts as a more comedic foil to Lyric is unique. But Lyric is quite a forgettable villain. He has an interesting setup, but has a basic motive and isn't really as strong as some of the previous villains. There isn't really much mystery to him, and everything about him is explained in a quick 30-second summary by Cliff. There's a part where Lyric explains how working with the crystals affected his health, which caused his resentment towards the Ancients and led to him creating this mech suit.
I craved the strength and certainty of steel. I aspired to the purity of the blessed machine.
But it kinda doesn't have as much build-up, and he doesn't really have that intimidating threat feeling like Eraser or even Adventure 2 Eggman. When they reach Bygone Island, there's a part where him and Eggman are just wandering around a deserted village, when they could have been a part where they're raiding the village demanding the crystal. Apparently everyone is focused on the re-election of the mayor, but why not have a surprise attack on the conference? At least with Infinite we see him attack the Resistance in flashbacks, and we see how King Arthur's presence affected the kingdom. The only thing Lyric seemed to impact was leading to this turtle to grow bad crops, which Sonic can tell is correct during the time travel trip. Lyric's moments with Eggman are decent at least, along with his betrayal. But again, outside of that, he isn't all that memorable. I can understand liking Methodist or Infinite, but there isn't a whole lot to Lyric, and I can see why not many people talked about him, and I can see why the show chose to ignore him. They had their own villains to work with. But speaking of villains, let's talk about a part of Boom that people are mixed on.
Not so fast, Sonic.
To be honest, I don't really mind Boom's Shadow that much. His presence adds a level of tension, the fight scenes with him are well animated, there are one or two good lines out of him, and I actually like Kirk Thornton as Shadow. He brings a strong, sly tone that fits this version well, almost sounding close to David Humphrey's lines. Not just here, but for his other appearances. But his presence in the character and story is pretty one-dimensional and a bit out of place. He shows up, teases Sonic, they fight, he gets flung into a portal, and doesn't appear again until the end where he compliments the heroes. His appearance is very out of place, which makes sense with how he was added much later on. It would have been better if Metal Sonic showed up instead, and when thrown into the portal he shows up during Lyric's betrayal, where he then takes control of him. As it is now, Shadow's the only part that feels the most out of place, and isn't that fun either. Until maybe the show at least. Also, I wish the show got to use Shadow more. I heard the writers were reluctant on including him as they felt he would clash with the writing tone. With the layout of Season 1 I can understand, but if it got a third season they could have utilised him more with how Season 2 had more continuity and tighter elements. Maybe this time he gets to fight Sonic on his terms. As someone who doesn't mind his portrayal in the games, I don't hate his personality in Boom too much, even if it's a caricature of what most non-fans think he's like. Heck, that's what I thought he was always like until I played more of SA2 and the more story-heavy moments of Shadow 5. Speaking of Shadow, the time travel element is near identical to the one in Shadow's Sonic 06 campaign. Think about it. Two of the main characters end up travelling back in time to a research facility. One of them ends up chasing down and stealing the main villain to stop them from doing any more harm. At the beginning of the story they are partially reawakened by said person, and that's why they recognise the main hero and have a personal connection. It's really near accurate. Also, if this was 1,000 years ago in the past, why is everything more futuristic? What is this, the Star Wars prequels? There's also this robot companion that once worked with Lyric called QNC that pops in and out of the story. It's telling there were some story elements with him that were cut, with how Sonic straight up asks how he just keeps popping out of nowhere. Also, Sonic and Amy get chased by a huge robot with tentacles called Guardian, in a game released a little after Breath of the Wild's E3 trailer, and over 2 years before its release. I know it's always brought up, but I will say the animation of the characters are really expressive. The one video talking about the animation in Sonic goes into more detail, but my favourite example would probably be the one where Knuckles pats Sonic on the back so hard a ring pops out. How it took this long for a joke like this to happen in the series is surprising. There are a few moments where the expression could have had more usage. Like when Cliff finds out Sonic released Lyric, his reaction feels too civil. There was huge potential in having a more outraged reaction towards Sonic before gaining composure and telling him how to stop Lyric, just to signify how big of a threat things could be. Also, it's more related to the game, but while the graphics aren't the best, even compared to colours, I don't think they look that terrible. There are comparisons saying it looks like a PS2 game, which, compared to Sons of Liberty, fair enough, but a more suitable comparison would probably be very early PS3 graphics from a non-AAA dev, or even Vita graphics. Also, the soundtrack is rather average and doesn't fully fit a Sonic game. It more suits a LEGO game or Uncharted, which makes sense with the Naughty Dog connection. There are a few standout tracks, but most of it doesn't fit scenes well and are pretty forgettable, even more than some of Force's or even Secret Rings tracks. It's interesting how Richard Jacques composed one of the most upbeat Sonic soundtracks and one of the most unexciting.
Can you sing anything from Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric?
I'm like the biggest
Sonic
fan that I know of. I can't think of any of the songs.
In terms of side characters, they don't really have an awful lot to do beyond brief dialogue moments. It's surprising how Styx has only barely 2 scenes in the whole game with how she's part of the main cast of the show. Almost makes you wonder if there was a different character planned to be the 5th member of the team at one point. There are unused lines related to Percy that hint she was going to have a more prominent role in the story. Maybe she was considered for the cast. I do think some of the characters would have fit the show, and while some of them do, I'm surprised others didn't. Cliff, Ginger, or the chef guy would have easily worked in the show. In fact, the way none of the events of the game are ever mentioned in the show is really baffling. The only times that Tails is playing, the inner beam that only appears 2 or 3 times, a bounce pad joke, very surface level mention of the ancients, and their outfits glow in the dark, and not to the pre-order bonus of all things.
Not cool, Sonic.
Not cool, Sonic. Not cool, Sonic. Not cool, Sonic. Not cool, Sonic.
Not cool, dudes.
I don't know if it's due to them not knowing the full outline of the world building, and or they just chose to do their own thing, but it's really fascinating. Maybe it takes place in a parallel universe. Season 2 confirmed they exist in the Boomverse, so it could work. A different dimension that's more rural, where Sonic's more experienced and mature than his regular counterpart, and has ties to ancient lore. And any reference to Rise in the show could correlate to unrelated events. I will say Eggman showing up at the end to attack Lyric is funny, the teamwork move they used to beat Lyric is cool, and the celebration is a nice conclusive ending at least. But it's weird how they just leave Lyric there and how his fate is unknown. Does he too get exiled to the realm of not being allowed to be in a movie ever again? Rise of Lyric's story is a real mixed bag. I know the script was changed around when development was shifted to the Wii U, but there were some interesting moments that, if they were tighter, would have been really good. Rise was planned to be more story-driven than the other games at the time, and if it wasn't compromised, it could have easily been the best storyline of the 2010s. As it is, I'd still say its story is better than Lost World and Force's, maybe Generations story, though it has some parts that near outdo the other stories, even if it isn't as memorable. It isn't complicated, it doesn't add needless plot threads, and doesn't have a lot of hit or miss jokes or interactions like the rest of this era. But it's still an inconsistent story that doesn't achieve its goal to clear us unlike the others. And I can't help but wonder what the original story is planned to be, since I can see a version of the story, let alone game, that would have been perceived better. I'll be honest, I was hoping for some underrated gem in Rise of Lyric's plot that could be maybe on par with Colors or even Shadows. And then I can do a parody cover if it's true, where I lament about how nobody else likes this story but me. Oh well. At the end of the day, it's kind of the Sonic equivalent of the Clone Wars movie. It ain't pretty, the higher-ups went too far in a few places, but at least we got a good animated show out of it. Man, I never thought I'd end up talking about Rise of Lyric for this long without even touching the game itself. But as we know, this wasn't the only Sonic game released on November 11th, 2014. Shadow Crystal is surprisingly not terrible either, what on earth. I mean, there are a few awkward moments, like how Amy stops fighting Lyric to message Sonic, leaving her right open to get captured, and some of the dialogue isn't the best, but I'll get to that. It's in its own side continuity from Rise, but feels like it's the one that's most canon to the show, as the portrayals are more close to it and some locations from the show make an appearance. Lyric captures Amy, and Team Sonic plus Sticks have to rescue her. Most of the story is told through text box dialogue, mostly about random vignettes stringed together, leading up to Amy's rescue. The writing isn't as toned down as I anticipated, but some of Sticks and Knuckles' lines can be hit or miss. Like when Sticks questions the phrase, "no I in team," that comes across as tedious. How lines like this fly under the radar when talking about the jokes in this era, I have no idea. I mean, I do know it's because nobody talks about these games. Like, yeah, Sticks is known for saying random phrases, but the way it's presented here feels a bit unnatural, if that makes any sense. Some interactions do feel close to the main series in some areas. Apparently in this universe, Tails' communicator also has translation issues. Some cutscenes could have had more action and would have benefited being properly animated or voiced. There are a few fun teamwork banter moments. Metal Sonic also appears once, and Eggman off-screen. Shadow shows up with the same role he had in Rise, except he's mind-controlled, and shows up to help take down Lyric at the end. Followed by a cheesy teamwork moment that gives Forces a run for its money.
Because we're a team! We got beaten to the punch, or in this case, the kick as a team. We can raise our heads proudly, knowing that we traveled all this way just to watch somebody else finish the job. When we walk down the streets and people whisper, those are the ones who couldn't quite save the day. Almost, but not quite. We'll smile together, because we didn't do it as a team. I finally understand teamwork. And it's beautiful.
Guess I could say it handles the theme of teamwork in a more interesting way than Forces. Which, yeah, I guess it technically does. There isn't as much substance to it, but compared to Lost World a year prior, it's a huge step up for Ken and Warren's writing. If it was more expanded on and maybe had more Eggman and Lyric, this would have been better, but for a side story, it's mostly passable and has a few good moments. As the kids say, it subverted my expectations. But I'm not done yet, because we have the prologue comic to cover, which has some interesting details. It shows Lyric getting sealed away by the Ancients before cutting to the present where he's trying to put together his plans. He then runs into, fights, and then mind controls Shadow. It also has a little segment with Team Sonic that sets up their role, like Knuckles waiting for Amy. Now here's where things get interesting. In Rise of Lyric's Japanese dub, Shadow has a robotic voice and says he was sent by Lyric to take down Sonic. There's also an unused line about Shadow having a chip device on him. And in Shattered, Sonic mentions how Shadow is acting robotic. So this implies that some scrapped plot threads from Rise potentially carried over the Shattered Crystal. Plus it would explain why Shadow seems impressed by Lyric's defeat here, since he seemed hell-bent on getting back at him. Maybe Amy being captured by Lyric was another cut plot idea. Someone's probably already noticed it already, but it's something that adds another dimension to the production of Rise. Especially with how there's almost no information related to Shattered Crystal's development. If this battle was added in, it would have added more of a reason for Shadow to be in Rise. Also, the comic was written by Ian Flynn, so this technically predates Frontiers as being the first game in the series to have material written by him. Go figure. But how does the final part of this trilogy hold up? Sonic Boom, Fire Red and Ice Blue is considered the best of the Boom games, and the same can be said for its story. It's fine, even though I don't have a whole lot to say about it. It feels a lot like an extended Season 1 episode. There's some fun moments between the characters, and quality-wise it's a step up from Shattered Crystal, being fully animated and voiced. The gang encounters a rogue Eggman robot called Defect after gaining elemental powers, and they chase after him. I actually like Defect's backstory and Eggman's insults towards him.
The very sight of you sickens me. And get a shave! You look like a hipster with that ridiculous beard.
Look, we got a Sonic villain working with Eggman that upstages him near the end. This is just like old times. It's a little awkward how he has a more in-depth and interesting backstory than Infinite, but I'll take it. The pre-rendered cutscenes are great too, and look a lot closer to the TV series. It doesn't look as compressed as Lost World 3DS, but I hope someday they get released in full HD. Eggman also catches Sonic to challenge him to a race at one point too.
You know I'm just gonna bust out of this rig and wreck whatever your dumb plan is, Egg Breath.
The dumb plan is a race. Not just a race, but a special race to see who's the fastest.
Sticks does seem uncharacteristically friendly towards Defect, which seems unusual, but could be a callback to one of the earlier episodes where she befriends a robot dog. Other than that, it's a lot funnier, especially the ending. I don't have much else to say about it. It's adequate, and easily the best Sonic storyline from the 2010s. I know some of the writers of the show likely added in additional material, but I'd also say it's the best storyline Ken Pontac and Warren Graff wrote for the games too. The singular episode they wrote for the show, Return to Beyond the Valley of the Cubots, was surprisingly good too. So they can't be capable of writing a competent Sonic storyline when they aren't stuck to the boundaries of the main canon and given enough material to work with. And yeah, this line from my colours segment here is definitely the best of the Pontaff writing.
But that's not saying much.
Yeah, scratch that, because these are peak Pontaff writing. And this time, that's saying a lot. Congratulations, Sonic Boom Trilogy. You joined the category of trilogies where the third one is easily the best. Up there with the Star Wars prequels, Dollar Trilogy, Home Trilogy, Wolverine Trilogy, and the Cars Trilogy. Wait a minute, I hate Cars 3. Get that off the list. So did the Sonic Boom games succeed at good storytelling? Kind of. I mean, I'll probably give this video clickbait title saying they're awful because fans love it when you mock the writing that came from this decade of games. But compared to the game that started it, and the plot lines around the same time, could have been worse. They're a bit clunky at times, but some of the ideas are rather good and should have a little bit of acknowledgement despite the quality of the games. Shattered and Fired I feel had a good layout, even if they aren't empowered to tell the storylines, let alone most of the writing in the show. In the case of Rise, despite its mediocrity, I feel the story had just as, if not more potential than 06 and Forces combined. I know it's cliche to do when revisiting abandoned parts of Sonic, but I do sometimes wonder how different things could have been if its development wasn't so hasty. Looking through some of the dev art shows there was so much planned that was either cut or never went past concept. It wouldn't have been amazing and still be debatable for the designs at the time, but at the very least it could have been a 7 out of 10 and got a cult following later on. And if it performed well, it would probably encourage Sega to take more risks with the series again. Maybe there would be more Boom games, more mainline spin-offs, maybe let other studios develop Sonic. Which they did, but one of them led to a remaster with a disastrous launch, and the other they still haven't done a sequel for despite being the most successful game in years. Yet if we didn't get Rise of Lyric, how different would the series be now? Sega put a lot into Boom succeeding, but what if it didn't go ahead with it and funding went towards the main series? Lost World, Forces, and even Frontiers would be completely different. Yeah, Rise caused Sega to take their time with Sonic releases and not rush them out annually, but it still would have resulted in them having a completely different mindset towards the franchise today. But we wouldn't have the Boom show, or the more self-aware approach of the social media pages. Instead of Sonic Boom being my first Y2P source, it would be Huxley Pig. I'm sure most people watching don't even know what that is. This is what I meant about this whole sub-series being a massive double-edged sword. I know it's a lot to take in, but it's just one of those areas that I feel a lot of people don't really think about with the aftermath of the series. It reminds me of The Amazing Spider-Man 2's legacy, with how it still has that what could have been stigma attached to it for the past 7 to 8 years, despite its aftermath leading to better things. Okay, existentialism out of the way. Might as well talk a little bit more about the show while I'm on the topic. I know Season 2 gets more attention due to its meta moments and more fun scenarios, but I think Season 1 has some pretty underrated moments too. The first 2 episodes gave off a good first impressions at the time. My Fest Dixie was good, Cowbot, Aim Low, Fire in a Crowded Workshop, and Cabin Fever all funny episodes too, to name a few. It's kind of funny comparing the more straightforward storylines of the trilogy to some of the more wacky elements of the show and how different they can be. It reminds me of the Mario cartoons' approach to stories and characters compared to the games.
Casanova Koopa!
But Mario!
Who knows how far Boom would have gone if it went beyond Season 2. Also, while I like the direction the show went, it would have been cool if it got the chance to retell the events of Rise of Lyric as a TV movie in their own style. Basically make it more interesting, make Lyric more memorable, remove unnecessary parts, incorporate some parts of Shattered Crystal in the show's own lore, add an obligatory fourth wall / meta bit, and I think there could be something worthwhile. I mean, it's too late now since the Boom series have been abandoned and Sonic Prime's on the way. Plus, if the producers got the chance to make a TV movie, they would opt for an original story. But it's just an idea that could have been pushed forward if things went differently. I also wonder if any hypothetical ideas for Season 3 will surface like with SatAM. If I had to guess, they would have done more with Roboken. Perhaps another main series character would have appeared like with Vector, and they'd finally get the chance to title an episode The Last Resort, so Alan Denton can finally rest easy. Speaking of Alan Denton, I'd recommend taking a listen to episode 19 of the Sonic Podcast Adventure that came out while I was working on this. It has him as a guest where he talked about his experience working on the show, including behind the scenes and unused ideas. The episode even answered a few of my queries that I had across the video, like the usage of Shadow. And with that, every major Sonic storyline has been reviewed and ranked. Not if I have anything to say about it. And we do. I'll be right back. Sonic Rush's story is alright. Never been a huge fan of Blaze, but her interactions with Sonic are interesting enough. I do think there could have been more with Eggman Nega. Like, are you really going to tell me a bit more thought and effort into this design than they did with Zavok? Come on. Sonic 3 Knuckles is a simple but compelling story for the time. The scene in Hidden Palace between Eggman and Knuckles is one of the most iconic moments in the series, let alone of the Genesis era. The end Knuckles part is a fun epilogue too. It's a nice story that laid out the foundation for future storylines to come, especially Adventure 1. I'll always love Sonic C's opening, but come on, You can't go wrong with Free Knuckles. Okay, now every story is being reviewed and ranked.
Did you forget about me?
It's okay, better than Free Riders, has some fun interactions, but still pretty forgettable. 6 out of 10, Transformed is better. Okay, that's as much as I can handle. Apologies to all three fans of Shuffle, Rivals, and Chronicles. Here's the final ranking for all the stories covered. Also, I've decided to move Shadow and Colors around. It's here I put some conclusion about Sonic storylines, but everything I said in the original video still stands. Sonic storylines can be fun, but with the mixed quality of the later ones, it's due time there should be a higher priority for the series again, outside of the shows, comics, and movies. I previously said it should be the main focus, but that's a stretch since I know not every game can be Uncharted or Half-Life 2 in terms of story-driven gameplay. Just an energetic story that understands what made the others so beloved in the first place. Whether it be an ensemble of multiple characters, or a small-scale one. And with Ian Flynn confirmed to be writing Frontiers, at least gives some confidence they'll be near the same level as the older ones. When it comes to what makes the best Sonic storyline, I think it comes down to what you're personally looking for in the series. If you want something with an ensemble of characters, high stakes, and embraces the series, then stories like Adventure 2 and Black Knight are the best options. If you want something a little more simpler, has good pacing while keeping a strong heart at its core, then Secret Rings and Unleashed are the way to go. It's been a little under a year since I came up with the idea to do a ranking list of the main storylines. I wanted to do this series because I feel it's an area of Sonic that's mostly talked about and simultaneously not talked about as much. In the sense that most of these plotlines aren't talked about as greatly as others, if not at all, while some are talked about greatly whilst leaving out noticeable details. While it hasn't gotten a huge audience just yet, it's been fun being able to express my thoughts on this series since it's hard to find a way for me to do so. I mostly had a fine I'll do it myself approach to most of this, and again attempt to bring something different for discussion in the community. And like I said, not a single soul talks about the writing of the Sonic Boom games. While you're all busy fretting about quote sizes and nose hairs, I was focusing on unique material that also mattered just as much.
Dip, 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 dip.
At the end of the day, I still enjoy Sonic, even with the mixture of quality and opinions online. But like with any character in a franchise that's been around for years, getting him and what he's supposed to mean right is no easy task. And I understand after waiting so many years for something surprising again, it can be easy for people to get jaded and start picking things apart the moment it gets showcased. Guess Amy really meant it when she said people fight over trivial things. But no matter what, it won't take away the memories of old that define the series and its fans for so many years. Thank you for making it to the end. I don't really know how this will do since there isn't as much of a reaction with these types of videos despite some of the view counts. I wasn't sure if I'd end up making this since the writer's video didn't do as well as I hoped. But hopefully I got something good out of this. If it gets enough views and likes in enough time, I might do more. That likely won't be as frequent since it depends on the type of topic I might do. Might do a non-Sonic one for a bit of variety, but if I have time I could do a review of the next movie when it comes out. But if people still want the YouTube Poop side of the channel, I might as well continue to supply for that area, which is fine enough for me. If you've seen my community tab post, you probably might know what some of those sources might be. So stick around for those. Again, I'm still focusing on college projects in the background, but some of the upcoming videos should be worth the wait. But in the meantime, this is where I get off.